Hey guys, Mr. Everything here, back with another movie review video, and in today's video, I'm going to be reviewing Dark Phoenix. Alright, so for you guys that are new here, how I like to do my reviews, I like to talk about the cast, the story, give some of my positives, some of my negatives, and then give my score. And also, the screen you guys are looking at, yes, it is the thumbnail for the video, but don't worry, I'm going to be adding clips and images from the film. So just jumping into the review. So obviously, this stars Sophie Turner, James McAvoy, Michael Fassbender, Jessica Chastain, Nicholas Hoult, etc. So the story of this movie, Jean Grey, she gets the Dark Phoenix power that turns her evil, and the X-Men must stop her to save the world. So as you guys know, this movie has had a very bumpy road. I still remember when the first images for this movie came out in 2017, and it's just had so many reshoots and production problems and pushbacks, and we all kind of forgot about this movie and thought that the movie was done and they weren't going to release it. And then the first trailer came out of nowhere, and the first trailer wasn't that great either, and I haven't really liked the marketing for this movie. I like the final trailer, I actually really liked the final trailer for the film. That came out a month ago, so it was already kind of too late at that point, and just I don't think it's going to do that great at the box office. And as far as critically, it's actually the worst reviewed critic film in the X-Men franchise. It has a 22% on Rotten Tomatoes, so it's not doing that great critically. Now, to be fair, a lot of critics are saying that this is the worst X-Men movie ever, and they're saying it's really bad, but honestly, it's not the worst X-Men movie to me personally. I could definitely think of two other movies that I think are worse, but I'll get to that later in my review. So to start off with the positives, my only real one positive, which is 90% of the positives with this movie, is the acting. Minus Jennifer Lawrence, you could kind of tell that she doesn't want to be here, and she's been very public saying that she doesn't like the Mystique makeup, and you could just tell she doesn't care about this role anymore. But luckily, this is her last movie and pretty much everybody else's last movie, so it doesn't really matter anymore. But James McAvoy, Michael Fassbender, they do a great job. I thought Nicholas Hoult did a pretty good job, and all the actors did pretty fine. They all did good, and that's where the positives end. As far as that, honestly, I can't think of anything else. I kind of like the score for the movie, and I actually noticed that the score was by Hans Zimmer. Hans Zimmer is a very famous film composer. He does a lot of movie scores and music for a bunch of DC films like Man of Steel, BVS, The Dark Knight, so it's actually not too surprising that the music and the score for the movie is pretty good because he's a really good film composer. But other than those two, just jumping into the negatives, it's just pretty much everything else. This whole movie is just meh. It's just nothing to it. And like I said earlier, it's not as bad as critics are saying. I wouldn't say this is awful, worst comic book movie ever, worst superhero movie ever. It's not that bad, but everything is just bad. The script is bad, the dialogue, the characters are very inconsistent, but we all kind of gotten used to that with these X-Men movies because the continuity is just so off the charts. None of these movies make sense anymore, at all. So I'm not going to really say that as a flaw, considering you could say that with every single movie, but just everything else is bad. And specifically, my main one negative with this movie is the directing. This has been a worry for me for over a year. Ever since they said that Simon Kinberg was the director, I've been very worried for this movie. And the reason why is Simon Kinberg has been a producer and a writer on a few of these X-Men movies, and that's great and all, but he's never directed a film. And this was his directorial debut, a super big blockbuster movie. That just doesn't sound like a smart idea. He should cut his teeth on something else. He should have started off with something more smaller. I just don't think it's ever a good job for a first-time director to direct his first movie being a super big blockbuster, because it's just too much to handle. And I was just always worried because he's never directed a movie before, and you can see it. You can see it in the script, you can see it in the action, and yet again, nothing in this movie is extremely bad, but it's just all bad. The action, it's fine. The directing, of the shots and just certain scenes and dialogue, scenes where characters are talking, nothing is special to it. And also the story of this movie, it's the Dark Phoenix story, obviously, but other than that, I can't tell you what's going on in this movie. It's just kind of oh, hey, here's the X-Men, here's these characters, nothing really happens, and it's just bland. It's just nothing to the bones of this movie. What is the deeper meat of it? And it kind of felt light too. There was no real stakes to this movie. This being the Dark Phoenix storyline, you would feel there would be stakes to the movie, oh my god, who's gonna die? You felt no stakes, weirdly. You felt nobody was gonna die. And what's funny is they're marketing this movie as the last big X-Men movie, because technically it is the last big X-Men film in the Fox universe, at least. And yet again, the movie isn't that big though. It's nothing to it. It's just feels like another X-Men movie. It feels like, hey, here's the X-Men on their adventures. And you know, there's so many other things I could pick apart in this movie, but I did want to keep this review short. I'm not going to be like all these other reviewers and, you know, bash the movie for 20 minutes. I mean, I guess I could do that, but you guys have already heard it enough. Every negative review I pretty much agree with, except the reviews that say this is like the worst X-Men movie. As I said earlier, this isn't my least favorite X-Men movie. X-Men Origins Wolverine is pretty bad. Now, technically that's a Wolverine movie, but it's an X-Men movie. It has X-Men in the title. It's a part of the X-Men universe. If we're judging all the X-Men movies, that is probably still my least favorite X-Men movie, is X-Men Origins Wolverine. X-Men The Last Stand, I will probably say, is about tied with this one. And speaking of that, Simon Kinberg worked on X-Men Last Stand. And the fact that he still didn't really learn from his mistakes is also really bad, because both of these movies are bad. And he worked on that movie too. And it's like he didn't even at least semi-learn from his mistakes. If anything, he downgraded from his mistakes. And it just kind of sucks. So overall, I'm going to give it a D-. So would I recommend this film? I wouldn't recommend it, to be honest. If you guys don't want to see it, then don't see it. But if you're bored, see a matinee. Luckily for me, I saw it for free. I had a free movie pass, so I used that. But yeah, that's gonna do it for my Dark Phoenix review. You guys comment down below and give me your thoughts on this. Be sure to like, subscribe if you guys are new. Check out my other movie review videos. Check out my Dark Phoenix video. And have a great rest of your day. Alright, bye guys.